Good afternoon. My name's Tim Markle. I'm director of the Southern Regional Center for Children and Youth with Special Healthcare Needs. You are listening to Hope for the Holidays, watching Hope for the Holidays, whatever it may be, whatever you feel like you're doing. But it's Hope for the Holidays. Ideas help us celebrate and not stress over winter break. And today we are going to talk about how this is supposed to be fun, navigating the winter holidays, autism, and your extended family. We'll be joined by Erin Thomson. Erin is a senior clinical social worker in the Waisman Center clinics and the Autism Treatment Program. She works with families across the lifespan to ensure that they have access to community resources, are well supported in school, and identify ways to enhance family functioning. Erin also hopes to maintain the fun throughout this holiday season with her own children. So she's hoping to also just bring it on home. So Erin, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Tim. And you're right. I'm hoping that the collective wisdom here is also going to potentially benefit me a little bit. So I'm going to share my screen, and full disclosure, I cannot talk and do that at the same time.
You are not alone in that. Is I always have this pause as I bring up my screen when I'm sharing it. So you are in, I hope, good company.
Excellent. So we are a small but mighty group here today. So please just jump in if you have a question, have a thought to share, have experience, want to just be acknowledged for the difficulty that is life. It's a group effort around here today. So, I think we have to always start, particularly in our COVID life, and kind of recognizing our current reality. And I think, for many of us, we made a lot of sacrifices last year. In some ways, I think last year was easier in the sense of it was very clear of hunker down at home, don't see people outside of your immediate household. If what's right for your family is that you see people outside your immediate household, that you're making very conscious, safe choices. In some ways that is easier, as hard as it was. I think many of us were coming into this holiday season thinking about kind of all the things that we missed, that we enjoyed in previous seasons, that, we had kind of done our part. Perhaps all of the adults and children over the age in your house are partially, fully vaccinated. But the reality is we're also in a bit of a surge right now, and it's a tough time. And if you've got children under 5, if you've got immunocompromised adults in your home, there's sort of this question of what's the right answer? And how do you find that balance? And so in some ways, this year almost feels harder than last year because the answer isn't quite so clear cut. And you're sort of navigating both what the needs of your immediate family, the needs of your extended family, all of the sacrifices you've been making up until this point, and the desire to have a little bit of Christmas magic or holiday magic or New Year magic. So that's I think it's helpful just kind of frame where we are in this moment in time. And I say that both as a parent and as a social worker. It's all kind of coming together, particularly if you're a family that celebrates Christmas or Kwanzaa, which are coming up, really thinking about okay, well, what am I doing Friday? I think when we think about how do we navigate the holidays, when you have a child with a disability, particularly a child with autism, both prior to sort of our COVID pandemic, as well as thinking towards the future and hoping towards the future, I think there are things that are also going to be useful to us now, right? Finding that balance between some consistency for your child, for your family, and some expectation of flexibility. We know that children in general and children with autism in particular really benefit from having some level of consistency in scheduling, thinking about what are the touch points in your daily schedule that maybe you want to keep. Do you want to kind of keep mealtime about the same? Do you want to keep bedtime about the same? But what we do in the in-between is maybe where we look for some flexibility. I think we think about here also, how do we set clear expectations for all of the adults involved? So whether it is the parents, the grandparents, the aunts, the uncles, the childcare, whomever is really involved in setting the stage for your children, really needs to be clear about what are we expecting of this child at this moment in time. And maybe the goal for an activity is that you have shown up and then you get the tablet. Maybe the goal for the activity is that you're going to participate in unwrapping one gift. Maybe the goal is that we're going to take gifts home and we're going to take a bunch of pictures and send them out after. Whatever the expectations are, that everybody is really clear on them so that the child isn't getting mixed messages, because that's where you end up with a meltdown, right? When no one is clear about what to do, what's expected, and then feelings are hurt, and it's sort of the child who ends up lost in the lurch. This is where we want to really prepare your child for what the day or the event might look like. Depending on the age of your child or their needs, a visual schedule or even just a quick jotted out agenda might be really helpful to go back to with them. Whether it's looking at it the night before, the morning of, and when you arrive, them having it available to look at so you can kind of point through where we are in the schedule and the routine, may just help them to feel more oriented in time and space and what they're supposed to be doing at that moment. You may want to think about whether or not you're going to practice activities that you want your child to participate in. Are you a family that attends religious services? At this point in the year, you're probably a little behind on practicing, but something to mark down for the future. But if that's something that you want to do, like Christmas Eve, probably not the best time to do your first religious event in 6 months. So really thinking about that, thinking about like, do they have a lot of experience with opening gifts in the recent past in front of a crowd? Are there ways that you can set them up for being successful? And then also thinking about some downtime and space to take a break, particularly if you are celebrating a holiday or an event that is not in your own home. Is there a place that they can go that is going to be safe for them, that's going to allow them some downtime, where you're not worried about what their little hands might get into depending on their age, where they really are able to have some time and calm down? And then kind of the corollary to that is using that proactively, not waiting to the point where everybody is on edge, but thinking like, okay, you know what, we've been with the cousins for about an hour, maybe let's go take 5 minutes to read a book, go for a walk outside. Do we have a set amount of screen time that we're going to allow in certain intervals? But really using that downtime as part of the day and the schedule for the day. Wow.
So Erin,
Yeah.
I think a lot, back to those clear expectations for adults involved. I know that some of our kiddos, they have some sensory issues. And so remembering which of our relatives are the hard huggers and which are the relatives that are expecting that peck on the cheek, and maybe letting them know beforehand that, my child loves you, but he's not a hugger. And so, don't set up the relative for an awkward situation or the child for that awkward situation as well.
That's such a great example, Tim, because I think that there's two pieces of that. It's setting up the adult that we're not going to force this child into physical contact that they're not comfortable with, and setting up the child that we're also not going to be rude, right? So you need to offer greeting in some way. You don't have to offer a hug. You don't have to offer a kiss. You do have to greet this person in some way and acknowledge their existence, right? Like, so it's that two-party expectation, and that you are there to help smooth that process along. You're going to intervene if that person's sort of ignoring your child's boundary around physical touch. But I think that's also a good point, though, kind of the bigger, and I'm sure Jen Bluski touched on this, but holidays can be like sensory overload between the food and the smells and the decorations and there's so many things to see and touch, and like it can be both wonderful and like I love Christmas decorations, and completely overwhelming. So thinking about like, does every inch of your home need to be kind of decked? Do all of the halls truly need to be decked? Or do we need to think about, where is there sort of a no holiday zone if that's what your child needs?
Yeah, and I also think of when my son, who's 23 now, on the spectrum, is we had to think about when we went to holidays at his grandparents and just one aunt, one uncle, very few cousins, just 2 or so cousins. But what was the purpose for our being there? Was it to sit together as an extended family? Was the main purpose to open gifts? Was the purpose to play games? Was it to catch up? on what's going on, because not all those things take him.
Right.
He didn't need to be part of all those things. So if my main purpose at this point is to interact with my in-laws and play some games, okay, maybe he's part of a game. Maybe he plays a game with us, but maybe there's another game that we're going to play that would be really stressful for him to take a part in. Okay, am I going to force him to take part in that game? Am I going to force him to talk about, the conversations about, so what's going on with Aunt Sally? When I know that it's just going to sit there and result in a meltdown. And it's going to result in him needing to get away. Or do I plan for that and say, okay, we did the presents together. So this was our together part. We did the dinner together. We did the presents together. Okay, we're going to play games. We're going to ask you to play one, but then you're free to do what you want, or you're free to go to that we had a space for him to go where he could chill, because he really got a little bit anxious around people. And so we always make sure that he had a place that he could chill alone.
And I think that's so important, Tim. It's that, like, you had a plan, right? And I think, and then you were able to communicate to the other adults what the plan was, and you were able to communicate to him what the plan was. And I think what that level of planning and communication looks like in many ways depends on your child, of course, and their age and their needs, but everybody benefits from knowing what the plan is, even if you're only just communicating it to the other adults around you.
Exactly. Love that.
I think one of the things that COVID has brought to us is that there's really been opportunities for assessment and in the choosing of what activities we do. And that to me is in fact a blessing, right? So when you're thinking about what holiday activities you want to participate in, I think it's really helpful to think of, like, what has historically gone well for your child with autism in your family, and what has historically gone poorly. And I think it's important to reassess these every, couple of years, because your child grows and changes, your expectations grow and change. And so, what you decide this year may not be what you decide every year from now until the end of time. But I think really making that assessment of, like, what, every single year we go to zoo lights, and every single year it's a problem because the animals are all inside. Okay, well, maybe it's time to stop going to zoo lights, or it's time to get a babysitter and go to zoo lights on your own because it's something that you will enjoy, right? So I think it's really looking at, and I think, I think last year and this year have really kind of brought us to a place where we can, we have to do some risk assessment anyway. And I think as part of that risk assessment, when you're thinking about your child with autism, you are really have the opportunity to say, okay, like, what are my really main priorities for my family? What are things that we always enjoy doing together, and do those things? And what are the things that we can say, what, this is never fun for my child, therefore it is never fun for me, and maybe we should stop participating. So that may or may not go over so well with your extended family, but I think that it's the reality, because if all you're doing is kind of trying to support and deal with a child who's having a meltdown or is having a terrible time, like, really, how fun is that for everyone? And so taking advantage of kind of the one little piece of positivity we can pull out of year 2 of COVID at the holidays is, this is our chance to really look at, what do we want to do, and what are the things that are going to be gone from our family traditions for now. Doesn't mean you can't revisit them, but for now, we're just taking a break from some of these things. So it's probably, the reality is many of these things true for all families with children. The other reality is that there's still time. So even if you are in the point of, like, Christmas is coming, you're a family that celebrates Christmas, it is Christmas week, you can still think to yourself, okay, well, how did Thanksgiving go? Have we done any other holiday events? What is the state of the world in your home right now? And then decide, like, okay, do we need to make some changes about what we were planning for the next few days? Do we need to make some changes around what we were planning for the new year? Really thinking about, what's your biggest priority? What brings you joy as a family? What brings you joy as a parent? What brings your child joy? Focusing on those activities and then adding from there. And this is the hardest time to be doing this, right? Because at this point, you've sort of set plans with your extended family. You've sort of staked your claim about what you were and weren't going to do. But you know your child, you know kind of where they're at this moment in time. And for some kids, kind of, particularly I think about kids who are in school now, we're on day 2 of winter break for many school districts. Maybe they've had some downtime and things are like, okay, we could actually do some things that we were thinking we weren't going to do. And there are some families where like, okay, really what we need is more of this, because that's where we are at as a family. So I think don't be afraid to reassess, and also acknowledging that this is the hardest time to reassess, right? Early December would have been a little bit easier to communicate perhaps to your in-laws that you weren't coming for Christmas, or that you were only coming for a short amount of time, but don't feel like because you made the plan that you 1000% need to stick to it, and really allow yourself the permission to do what feels right for your child and for your family. I think when you're thinking about kind of what's fun, I think making a list of activities, and I think being clear that those activities should be things that are fun for your child and also things that are fun for you. Okay. That it shouldn't be about, of course, as a parent, you are going to do things that are not particularly fun for you because they're fun for your kid. But also thinking about, are there some things on that holiday list that you enjoy doing? When you're considering whether or not you're going to do some kind of virtual event, how has online school gone? Whether was last year, or if you've been sort of in and out of the COVID quarantines in the various districts, that's a good sign of how a virtual event might go. And then also being really specific with your child about what your expectations are for the activity. I think this is also where you think about, like, where do you depending on your child's age, where do you let them opt out? And where do you say, okay, it's really important to me that we do X activity as a family. I would like you to do these other 3, but you can pick one of them, right? And so you really set them up to be successful. You set yourself up to actually enjoy the activities that are really important to you. And then also kind of thinking about, like, well, there's nothing on here that I'm like 100% really want to do, and my child is kind of about, where you go, do we even have this on the list, or do we take it off the list, or do we decide like 5 minutes before it starts, are we going or not going? So having, again, coming back to that idea of like some consistency, some expectations, and then some flexibility in the moment. The time to reflect on all of this for next year is in January, right? So give it a couple of weeks, end of January, really think through what went well this year, what was okay, and what went terribly. Because this is the time to start thinking about, like, what do we definitely want to do next year if it's an option? What are the things that are maybes, and what are the things that, this isn't where we are as a family right now. I think as we get further and further away from the actual event, it all starts to blur and be like, oh, it was kind of fine. Versus being close enough to the event to really remember, like, how did it actually go, but far enough away that we're not so emotionally invested in the experience. And then that also helps us to be at the point at which, when the inevitable conversation about the holidays start coming up in the fall, where you can have jotted down somewhere just some thoughts about what you are maybe going to do, what you're not going to do. But Tim, I see you talking, so.
I always talk, that's why I mute myself,
Oh.
because I'm highly verbal, but I really liked that idea of jotting down the notes of reminding myself what went really well, what was really successful, and that we really need to possibly revisit it this year. And then what was a bust? What did we think was going to go well, and it just didn't? Do we need to change something in it? Was it the timing? Were we all tired? Were we all hungry? Or was it the event itself? Was it the travel? What didn't work, so that I don't continually do the same things year after year and go, well, this January 20 or this December 23rd was just miserable. What is it that I can change? I love that.
Well, and I think that sort of really, like, focused in kind of assessment of, like, okay, Was it the activity that was wrong? Or was it the fact that it was the fourth activity of the day? Or we got there and it took us longer, so we didn't, like, nobody had eaten, and if we had had a snack or dinner beforehand, it would have been fine, right? Like, that's why I think you want to do this sort of close to the event, but not when you're still feeling like this was terrible and sad about it, right? Like, where you can really look at it critically and say, okay, like, if I had done X, Y, or Z, I think this would have been really successful. Or, you know what, everything about this was terrible and I never want to do it again. both of those answers are reasonable. But then on the flip side, thinking about, okay, the things that went really well, like, okay, what did I do to set this up? Was it just the right activity on just the right day? Was it, you know what, we could have done this activity any day of the year and it would have gone fantastically? Like, really kind of having both for things that didn't go so great and things that went really well, thinking through, like, what was your behavior? What did you set up in advance? How did you prepare for that activity in a way that got you both good results and not so good results? But I think, and then also writing it down somewhere, probably where you might remember it. This might be a place to, like, put it in your, like, calendar somewhere in September, so that when you get to it, you'll be reminded of it. Or, you know, maybe you're better at keeping notes places than I am.
At the very least, consider putting the note in with your wrapping paper.
Oh, there you go. That works.
As you're considering wrapping gifts, you can sit there and go, oh yeah, that didn't work last year. Let me call Aunt Mary and tell her no.
Wherever your future self is going to find it easily, I think, is the key, because your future self will thank you for this. I think if you are on here and you are saying to yourself, but I'm one of the good guys, I'm here to help, great, please be that person. Okay, I think if you are that person, the keys in my mind are really offering clear, specific help with no strings attached, right? So, can I watch your child so you can take the other kids to zoo lights? Can I make something specific for dinner that I know your kiddo is going to eat? And then if the offer is accepted, great. If the offer is declined, also great. Like, I'm not here to guilt you into letting, don't put me in the position of guilting you into helping you, right? Like, that's really up to you. I think if you are the one that is hosting an event, really checking in with caregivers, is there anything they need? You know, does their child need a quiet space? Would that be helpful? You know, is it really helpful to you if I ban screen time during the event? Like, it's my house. You know, like, is it just easier for you if I'm the bad guy? And, like, the rule at my house is kids aren't allowed on the screens. You know, and then you're not the one who's saying your kid can't do it when other kids maybe can. I think checking in, particularly around, you know, if you've got a child in your family who's got allergies or really picky either, or more selective either, really thinking about, like, what are you serving at that meal that is going to be comforting and friendly? And then kind of related to that, not being the person who comments on what the child eats or doesn't eat. Like, everybody knows little kids only eat the bread at meals on the holidays. Like, it's fine. Think about, can your role be to help clear the path, right? So if, you know, if the parent come to you and say, you know what, I think we need to get going. Do you just sort of jump into, great, let me help you wrangle your other kids? Can I pack up your presents? Can I pack, whatever it is, like, your job is just to help them graciously exit the door and kind of get where they need to be. And I think, as is true of any good host, but also if you're at somebody else's house and you're seeing that a family is struggling, really be gracious, help support them, help them to get what they need. And, you know, I think bonus points if you can also help that parent have a little time to enjoy the holidays themselves.
I'm reminded of when we would have dinner, either Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner, and I always had to remember that every year I would need to remind the host that, you know, we're going to put some food and we're going to ask my son to try it, but we're not sitting here until his plate is clean.
Right.
Because sometimes he'll try it and not like it. Mm-hmm. Sometimes he's not even going to try it. Sometimes the temperature is just off and he doesn't want to go near it. Mm-hmm. And if he just eats a roll, I'm going to be really happy and we'll take care of nutrition a little bit later. I'm not going to deal with his nutrition needs in the middle of Christmas dinner. It'll
Right.
be okay. But I would have to remind the people beforehand so that it didn't, well, aren't you going to try the turkey? Oh, come on. I spent time making the gravy. It's really good. You should try it. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going to go south really fast.
Like,
No
I
one's
don't
going
want
to
to
feel
sit
good.
through that meal.
Yeah, exactly. No one's going to feel good at the end. So remembering beforehand to say, okay, just remember, he's really picky. He's going to try some things. Maybe this year he's not going to try some things. As he got older, he tried more things. So just so, other parents know online is he started out very, very restrictive. I mean, it was rolls. He had rolls at Christmas dinner. And now he tries more and more stuff. And over the years, he would try more and more things. But it was really important that he didn't feel shamed at the Christmas table, at the dinner table. So that was my responsibility, communicate beforehand to make sure it didn't happen.
I think sometimes when you have a child with an identified need or an identified disability, they sort of become the focus, right? And so it becomes about, well, is this kid eating the turkey? Well, are any of the other cousins eating the turkey either, right? And so I think, you certainly want to have expectations for your children, but I think it's that balance of, are my expectations higher for this child because we know they have a problem versus any other child, right? And you may be working on some of these skills in treatment, you may be working on some of these skills in any of the services that you're receiving, but a holiday meal with an audience is completely out of the routine. It's probably not the place to be working on them. But if your kid can do it, then by all means, heap on the praise, heap on the positive reinforcement. But kind of thinking through like keeping your expectations manageable and helping the other adults around you to have at baseline the same expectations for your child with autism as all of the other children, and then adjusting up or down as is appropriate for that child's needs.
Yeah, and that was definitely, thanks, Erin, because that's definitely not to say that my way is the right way for every single child. It's the way that worked for my kid.
Maybe that's the key.
Yeah, exactly. You got to know your kid and you got to know your relatives.
And know where to put your foot down if you need to.
Exactly, as I had to learn that because I grew up in a very overly gracious family where you're at the host's house or whatever and you just sort of go with the flow and everybody's really gracious and then you complain about it on the car ride home. So it's like, well, we need to avoid doing that because that car ride home is going to be really miserable if our kid goes into meltdown mode.
Right. Well, other situations that you all have found yourself in, questions, things that you'd like to talk about, things you'd like to, let's use the collective wisdom of our virtual room here,
right? Things
that you're worried about, as we're heading into winter break and we're heading into some of the Christian holidays and the new year.
And you can feel free, if you don't feel like unmuting, you can always put it in the chat and I will relay your message to Erin. You're also free to unmute without turning on your camera. You're also free to unmute by turning on your camera too. Whatever. We're just really relaxed today. We just want to help and tap into the collective wisdom. So as people may be thinking about Erin, one of the things that one of the slides brought up to me is the responsibility and the struggle that I've had in the past and that I still do have sometimes in being the adult and being the one that has to regulate and watch out for my emotions because emotions are highly contagious. And so it's really hard sometimes for me in this time of year, and especially this season of COVID, to not get overly stressed, to not overreact, but to make sure that I'm taking care of myself, taking care of my emotions so that I can react in a healthy way so that I'm not the one leading with stress, so that I'm not the one leading with, oh my gosh, this is going to be a horrible experience. Oh, we got to hurry. We got to get there. And oh, I hate going here. And this is awful. I hate spending time, blah, blah, blah. Because those emotions are going to spill out. Just like our kids' emotions are shared with us. We know what their emotions are and they can affect us. Our emotions affect our kids as well. And so it's a time where it's kind of harder to take care of myself but I still have to make sure that I'm taking care of myself.
Full disclosure, I put myself in timeout the other day.
Good job.
But I think, when we're thinking about like, okay, a place to like have some downtime and take a break, like that's not just for your kid with autism. Like that may need to be for you. It may be that you need to be like, tag in another adult, tag in your partner if you have one, tag in a teenage cousin who can be entertaining for a short period of time. And are you making space for yourself? And I think also you can really use that as an opportunity to model for your child, right? I mean, I told my children that I was putting myself in timeout because I was losing my patience, right? And it's not going to hurt them for me to say that, right? But if I'm going to continue to escalate and I'm going to now I'm making the situation worse when I'm trying to get them to settle, right? So how about I model a good coping strategy of I'm going to walk away, I'm going to go to the bathroom, I'm going to drink water, and then I will come back to the chaos that you all are creating.
Yeah, that modeling it can be so important because they're gonna, well, I mean, think of my extended family growing up, there's going to be some excellent modeling of not good behavior, of not good ways of interacting with folks, of not good ways of handling anger and disagreement. We were a family that, historically it was my mom's family was very large. And so there are very different personalities and inevitably somebody would be mad at somebody. So they're going to have those opportunities to see how to lose control.
Right.
We get to model how to keep control.
Right. Oh. Anyone else want to join our little therapy session here? The holidays are hard. We have so many expectations and pressures and our own values and wishes and hopes and dreams. And I think sometimes, particularly when you have a child with autism, those can really butt into each other. And I think, some of you may be in a place where you're experiencing some grief and what you imagined your holidays might be are maybe not matching up. And that may have nothing to do with COVID. It may have everything to do with autism, or it may be both. And letting yourself experience that grief and acknowledging it for what it is might be where you're at this holiday season. And so being able to recognize what, this is harder than I thought it was, or this, most of the time it's fine, but then we get to opening gifts with the cousins and my kid doesn't want to participate in that kind of hurts my heart a little. So allow yourself to feel those feelings. They're not wrong feelings. Feelings are just feelings. They're not right or wrong, but know that is a very common experience for families. And you are probably not the only parent of a child with autism who's having that pang of oh, I wish this was easier for my child, or I wish this was easier for me.
Yeah, both of those. Either for our child, oh, I wish he didn't, have to apparently struggle with the noise, with the crowds. I remember having so much fun with all of my cousins running around. It was just, it was chaos. And that's not going to work. That didn't work for my son. Chaos made him shut down. And so trying to figure out how to help him interact and who are the key people that can, as his sister can, just point out, please play a game with your brother, can, some way to include without overwhelming was important for him growing up.
Yeah. If you've not watched the talks with Hunter and Tim as a side little plug, I highly recommend them.
So yeah, tomorrow at noon, we're doing holidays with Hunter. He's going to reflect on how he handled the holidays.
Well, these two are a nice little corollary to one another, aren't they?
They do. I try to keep things together in my life as much as possible. It just makes things a heck of a lot easier. So he's 23 now and is enjoying sharing about who he is. So it's always interesting. I never really know what he's going to say. So I remember one time when we were filming for something, a youth health transition thing, and they just wanted some clips, and they're like, okay, pretend to talk to your dad. And so he's like, okay. and he proceeds to tell me he's dropping one of his college courses. I'm like, dude, this is not the time that you tell me you're making life changes when we're on camera and you didn't prep me. And it was so, because my jaw wanted to drop. And of course I wanted to go into parental mode, but the cameras are rolling. And so why'd you do that? Okay. What the hell?
I'm going to say that's maybe the most socially astute thing he may have ever done, because
yes.
I think I put that overall net win. So
I think he knew what he was doing.
Yes.
No doubt in my mind. So I don't see anything in the chat. So, I mean, if you have any closing thoughts, words of wisdom, I love what you said about grief too, is we constantly have to be aware of what we think we want to happen, what we think should happen, and what the reality is. And that there may be times where reality just doesn't match up with what our plans were, and that there may be some grief involved in that.
I think the thing I want to leave you all with is whatever you choose to do this holiday season is the right thing. You made the right choice, and reflect on it in January and decide if that is the choice you want to make again in the future, right? Like you make the choices that you do with the best information that you have in the moment. Doesn't mean it always works out, but whatever you choose is the right thing, and decide if you're ever going to do it again.
So before we do, I'm going to stop the recording in a minute, but I did pop in a short feedback form in the chat. If you could give us some feedback so that we can report to people that people do listen to us and they find it useful. So if you can make sure that you put down that you find it useful, that would also be, really helpful. Of course, be honest in what you're doing. But thank you all for being here today. I know it's not the easiest thing to break away for 30 to 45 minutes during this season. Erin, thank you so much for being here, and look forward to extending more hope for the holidays to families and providers. Really appreciate it, Erin.
Thank you for having me. And if you are celebrating holidays in the next 2 weeks, happy holidays. Enjoy every moment. I hope there is magic for you and magic for your child.
Yes. Yeah. As I've been telling people, whatever you're doing, do it with joy.
Yes.
Just do it with joy. Thanks a lot, Erin.